I'm the director of the movie On Air that is shown tomorrow, September 7th, at Portobello Film Festival. So be there. It starts at 6 o'clock. And there's also I'm a filmmaker from Holland. And why I show my film around the world is because when your film get out there, I'm here. Portabello is the film festival that gave my movie career the best start. Like it was the first international film festival that picked my film for viewing, for a screening, and that's a fantastic feeling as a filmmaker, because you're making films to get an audience, and not only in your own country and in your own neighborhood, but around the world. And that's why I'm so thankful to all the other film festivals and also Portabello Film Festival that they want to screen my film, because this is what you want. You want an audience. That's great. So come over to Portabello Film Festival at September 7th at 6 to check out my movies, but also the other filmmakers' movies.
In London, they team up with a businessman and buy this cinema. They name it The Gate. Their policy is to discover and then screen the best new independent and alternative films from all around the world. They show films that would normally not get dubbed nor find a wider audience. Barbara and David also formed a company called Cinegate that would distribute these independent films. So, it's 1974, the UK has joined the common market, and you've purchased your 60 pence ticket. What's the first film you will see at the recently opened Gate? Fear Eats the Soul by Rainer Werner Fassbinder. A poignant love story with a raw edge, as a middle-aged woman falls in love with and marries a younger man who has come to Germany from Morocco. This film and those shown in the following years made The Gate a box office and critical success. The repertoire included Derek Jarman's debut film, Sebastian. At its screening in 1974 was one Nigel Andrews. He was just starting out on his career as the film critic of the Financial Times. Let us bring Nigel to the stage and invite him to share some of his memories of The Gate and the couple who ran it. Thank you, Nigel.
Yes, it was a transforming moment when David and Barbara Stone took over this cinema and then found other cinemas to show their films in. Fear Eats the Soul introduced Fassbinder. They showed other films from New German cinema, and it became a kind of centre for showing innovative art movies from Europe and around the world. But more than that, they were people who were very hands-on and hard-working in terms of persuading critics to see the films before they'd had a proper press show. They were very good at introducing critics to filmmakers. I remember they had a wonderful, large kind of neo-Victorian Gothic, as I remember, in looks, house in Phillimore Place, if I have the name right. And one of the first times, if not the first time I was invited there, they'd brought a filmmaker over from America who I had not heard of. Young guy, shortish guy, had a bit of an asthma, funnily enough, talking of Robert Donat, had a bit of an asthma problem. Very fast talking, very enthusiastic, and he was telling us, because there were other people than me there, that he had this idea for a new movie he was going to make about a troubled taxi driver in New York, starring an unknown actor called Robert De Niro. And so finally we realized that this was an up-and-coming filmmaker who had made a marvelous film called Mean Streets, actually, with De Niro. But that was typical of the kind of people you would be invited to Phillimore Place to meet. Bertolucci was there on another occasion, and it was a kind of salon for independent filmmakers from around the world. and they were wonderful hosts. David was very fast talking and wouldn't let you go until he persuaded you of his argument, but was also kind of funny and sort of warm-hearted as well. Barbara, was really quite a star in terms of British film distribution, at least. She could be tough, sassy, and very Brooklyn at one extreme, and kind of relaxed and serene and glamorous in a family environment as a kind of young mother figure. You'd have to imagine a kind of cross between television's Judge Judy, if you know her, at one end, and Isabella Rossellini at another, because she had been a model and she was very striking looking. Later on, they introduced some more controversial movies, one of which was Derek Chalmers' Sebastian, and Empire of the Senses, the Japanese film. And again, they showed the film early to one or two critics in order to get some heat behind the campaign to persuade the censor that he didn't need to cut these films or ban them. Curiously enough, the last time that I met David and Barbara Stone together, I invited them round to BAFTA, the British Academy of Film and Television Arts, for lunch, because I wanted to interview them and get words from them on a book I was writing about, of all people, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Because one of the first films they opened was Pumping Iron, at a time when Arnold Schwarzenegger was unheard of by anyone except people in the bodybuilding world. It was before Conan the Barbarian and the Terminator. And they told me a lot of kind of nice stories about how they'd had Arnold over, hosted him around London, when, as I say, he was still nothing but a young sort of ex-Austrian bodybuilder. And I remember couple of the things they told me. For the Stones, Arnold was a high-performance charm machine. He did everything he was asked in terms of meeting the press and posing for publicity photos. He had a real serious personal drive about him, says David. He said, "I'm going to be bigger than Sylvester Stallone," which at that time was considered impossible, since Stallone was the kind of mega film star that Arnold did later become. In the meantime, the bodybuilding machine needed fuel. David would go jogging with him every morning around Hyde Park and Kensington Gardens, after which they would stop off for breakfast at the Royal Lancaster Hotel. He'd have a dozen scrambled eggs, remembers Stone. So bacon, ham, toast, a steak. And then David and Barbara would have him over to their flat. Arnold was staying around the corner from them in Kensington, where a large bowl of fruit had been put out for the general delectation of guests. It was gone in an hour, says Barbara. I don't think anyone else ever touched they were wonderful days, and I can say, and I'm happy to say it in front of Jordan and Alexandra Stone, their children, who are here, that they were a unique couple in terms of the pizzazz they brought to distribution and exhibition. And they took critics out occasionally to dinner at Joe Allen's, and they were memorable occasions, and they would kind of do their spiel about what films they were going to opening and what kind of filmmakers they were going to bring over. But they did it with such sort of dash and good-heartedness and friendliness that their days I miss. I mean, they were in my early days as a film critic, and since then, frankly, no one has come over from any part of the world, even America, with quite their panache and commitment to promoting movies.
We have heard Prospice by Robert Browning from the lips of Robert Donat. Fear death, to feel the fog in my throat, the mist in my face. And R.D. Laing reciting If I Could Tell You by W.H. Auden. Time will say nothing, but I told you so. Words into images, the poetries of cinema. we've moved from the Electric Palace to the contemporary Gate Picture House, from films projected by disgruntled workers to state-of-the-art digital and surround sound. A picture house that opened in 1911 with 480 seats and room for 200 standing has 170 seats in the house today. I'm not sure whether there is a policy on standing nowadays. Tickets at the time of opening were threepence up to a shilling, equivalent to £1 or so in today's currency. I believe the cheapest tickets to be had at the gate today are £7.70 on a Monday and £14.50 otherwise. We've seen how one-reel shorts gave way to feature-length independent movies that pushed the boundaries of convention and taste. We have glimpsed how the history of this cinema has been shaped by pioneering figures with one eye on entertainment or art and the other on box office takings and managing a sustainable business in a constantly changing world. We have experienced the power of film stars and their impact on their audiences. We have celebrated the history of film made on fragile celluloid stock, and we regret how many of these films are damaged or missing. For the majority of silent films are lost to us. Even Robert Donat's first film is on the British Film Institute's list of the most wanted 75 lost films. And this fragility of image carries on into the era of videotape and beyond. The Gate, through all these 100 years of evolving technology, aesthetics and economics, has managed to remain a cinema. And who knows what is to come. In our Q&A, we will chat to the current cinema manager, Lee Elwood, and hear more about how he sees the future of the Gate Picture House. Now, we conclude our film programme by introducing Constantine Grass, a local artist and filmmaker who has curated this event. Constantine, thank you.
Thank you very much for coming along this afternoon. This is the third film programme that I've curated for the Portabello Film Festival, and it's probably my most ambitious. Hopefully it's not my last. I'm conscious that I've submitted you to the way that I think as an artist. I often play with several ideas in my mind. It's sort of akin to a dialectical process, and there's a degree of risk in that. But put simply, this event was primarily to celebrate the Gate and put on a mixed programme of short films that echoed what an audience might have seen in 1911. Newsreel drama, classic film stars, emerging and independent spirits. And I'd like to thank the actors for bringing this to life: Richard Seedhouse, Claire Finn, Harvey Stevens, and our lovely narrator, Jackie Cairns. Special thanks to Adriano Solari for the costuming, and of course to our guest speakers, Victoria Lowe and Nigel Andrews. This event also allowed me to pay my respects to two cool dudes, Adam Ritchie and Jonathan Barnett. I discovered Adam's amazing photographs of the play spaces underneath the Westway flyover. And these chimed with my childhood, and I've used them in several of my films. I wanted to share the only film he has made thus far. Hopefully he might make some more. It's never too late. And one that's never been screened before. And the same with Jonathan Barnett, who has kindly supported my films at the festival each year, and is the driving force for an amazing festival of film culture, free film culture, that takes place every year and gives up-and-coming filmmakers a chance to screen their films to a live audience. Now, I don't want to say too much about the film that will conclude this programme, but just prior to making it, I had a very difficult time personally and artistically. I don't think there are too many artists who have made their feature-length film debut and then have had to submit this to the police as evidence and withdraw it from public viewing. I'm talking about my involvement with Grenfell Tower, where I was an artist in residence. I was commissioned by the tenant management organisation in 2015-16 to make a short promotional film about the renovated Grenfell. I knew straight away that I couldn't make that film given the level of dispute between residents and the TMO and building contractors. Instead, I made an hour-long portrait of 6 residents who lived on the estate and their critical thoughts and feelings. This was a development, I felt, to my meditative approach to filmmaking. The film you're about to see is actually the 3rd part of a trilogy, and I have to thank Stuart Wallace, the gardener at Lancaster West Estate. Is Stuart Wallace at all here? Has he come along to the screening? Perhaps he is here somewhere hiding in the shadows. For sharing his time in the garden space with me. This film is dedicated to the memory of the 72 people who died at Grenfell Tower. Son of Barbara. Please have a seat.
Thank you.
Adam, would you like to come up and join us? Just put it together. In fact, Lee, sorry. Careful. Cables. Okay. Actually, Lee, I think you should come up here because I just want to begin this by chatting to you a little bit because we've had a bit of a history of the building, but we sort of stopped short a little bit of the present day. So it'd be quite nice to just get a sense of the gate as it is at the moment and its sort of history and things. So maybe I could just kick off by saying, is it true there was this naked person running around the cinema at all? Is it true?
That's the first time I've heard of it. It does happen. I've only been here...
Frequently.
I've been here 12 months. Luckily, you guys are all very well behaved, so I haven't had to deal with anything like that. I have been in cinema for about 6 years with a number of independents throughout London, and there have been stories of people doing things similar, if not slightly worse than what that was. But yeah.
So it was quite tame, but maybe things were happening.
Yeah, quite tame. Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much. And perhaps tell us a little bit about what is the Gate Picture House currently at the moment? Was it? Is part of the chain? What's the ethos
It's
behind
the Gate in its present form is part of the Picture House chain. They were also bought out just over a year ago by Cineworld. There hasn't been any dramatic changes so far. Cineworld appear to be very keen to keep Picture House as it is, as a separate entity. There have been some differences back of house, but that's been for the better. There's nothing that you guys would particularly notice has been anything majorly different. Claire Binns runs Picture House, and she has a particular soft spot for the Gate. She used to come here many years ago as a guest and just come and watch films here. She then, throughout her career, working her way all the way up from the bottom, started her first programming job was to look after the Gate many years ago. And even though now she's at the top of the tree, she still checks in every now and again just to make sure that everything's still ticking over quite nicely.
Sounds good. And in terms of the screening, what's the policy? Independent?
It's a bit difficult. We are still classed as an independent, but technically we are practically a chain right now. There's 26 cinemas in Picture House, and it is growing. It's going to be another 3 or 4 over the coming year to 18 months. There's going to be a new one actually just down the road in Fulham Broadway, which could be interesting because it's super close to us, so I'm not entirely sure how that's going to impact us here, but we have quite a loyal following, and I can't imagine it's going to do too much damage.
Sure. I'd like to thank you for hosting our event and connecting up with Jonathan in terms of sort of getting the Portabello Film Festival
Very well.
tied into the gates. And obviously this whole event is to celebrate that sort of history of the borough and its sort of rich culture here. So I'd like to just ask Dylan to say a few words perhaps about your memories of the gates from the 70s. You obviously were very young in the 1970s, but...
Is this on? Yeah.
Yes, I think
Is it on?
yeah.
No, I grew up in the cinema. I mean, since I was born in '67, and I was, I'm 52 now, so I was 3 or 4 when we came to this country in 1970. And I spent my entire childhood, adolescence, and into my 20s in the cinema, watching late night films, screenings for critics like Nigel Andrew talked about, that frequently we would have special screenings on Sunday mornings or at any time when the cinema wasn't open to screen potential films or films that friends of my parents wanted to show to them. And there was always a projectionist that was hired just for those few hours, just to make sure that they could screen the film for friends or birthdays for at every level. The cinema was used constantly throughout the day, throughout the week, all year round. And of course there were late night films from 11 o'clock till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, every single night of the week. And so I did not grow up in a conventional family. So of course I lived around the corner, secondary school was around the corner. And so I would be frequently here at night at hours that I wasn't supposed to be up, and taking a taxi home with maybe my brothers or my sister, and getting home and without anyone knowing that I had watched the late night films or been playing around with some of the staff also. It was my childhood.
And did you also work here? Because I was talking to your
No.
brother, you
No,
were a
I
bit
never
younger.
worked here.
Your
Yeah,
brother's a
no,
little bit
no.
older than you,
Yeah.
Jordan, who told me that he was basically, after he clocked off school, he would be here cleaning the projection, helping with the distribution of the films, catching taxis.
Well, actually, I worked at Cinegate, which was around the corner, but we were all recruited as children to be working at my parents at Cinegate. So that was everything from collating catalogues, the Cinegate film catalogue, where that was sent. They produced hundreds of these catalogues every year to be sent out around the world to universities, to other countries that had independent cinema chains, so that they could also rent those films wherever my parents didn't have the European or British rights to a specific film. So of course they would want other countries to rent those films that my parents held the rights to, because there were hundreds and hundreds of films that they owned the rights to in Cinegate. But at that time you would buy the rights for a film for a certain region of the world. And so that's what their Cinegate.
Does that still exist at all, Cinegate?
No.
What's happened there?
No, because the films would have been taken, the rights would have been finished, and they would have been bought by, now it would be, I've just forgotten what's the name of, there's various different, companies that would do that,
Perhaps you'd like to tell us a little bit, because we heard earlier from Dr. Victoria Lowe about the Rubber Donut Archive, which is in Manchester University, and I've had the pleasure of being one of the first persons.
You are the first.
I'm the first person
You
to
are the
come down to
first.
King's College London
Yeah.
to look at is it the Barbara Stone Archive?
It is.
Archive of Your Mother,
It is.
which is
Yeah.
a quite substantial collection.
It is. Yeah.
Perhaps you can say a little bit about that archive and
Yeah.
how
So
people might want to access
in
it over the
the
years.
mid to late 50s, my parents started to go to a film club in New York City that was run by a man called Herman Weinberg. And Herman Weinberg was a film academic, and he ran these film clubs in New York in the 50s. And that was, I would imagine Scorsese, who Nigel Andrews said that he met with my parents. He would have been going to those film clubs. I would imagine every East Coast or whatever American filmmaker was around in the 50s would have been going to Herman Weinberg film clubs and watching the films. And my mum
Which
always
cinema was he showing it in?
No, it wasn't a cinema. It was a film club. It might have been the New Yorker. It might have possibly, but I'm not sure actually. I'm not sure. But it wouldn't be difficult to find out because he's written many books. Yeah, my mum always used to say that he didn't actually really say very much. He would just screen the film, and it was just by his taste alone that's really how you would get a real feeling for really, really great cinema. And that was apparently how he really did run his film clubs. And anyway, so my mum collected everything. Books, paperwork, letters, documents, absolutely everything you can think of, all the films that they produced all through the 60s and into the 70s, all the paperwork, every single thing that you can possibly, anything connected to independent film production, she saved on their films. That would be everything from the subtitles that were made if it was distributed in France, or the editing paperwork, everything you can imagine. Anyway, so King's College London, the head of film at King's College is a man called Mark Shield, and he interviewed my mum because he was doing a 1968 week-long series of films at the BFI, and he wanted to show some of my parents' documentaries with the documentary film organization. This was really a cooperative that they helped found in the early 60s, and called Newsreel. And he was showing some of their films, and he interviewed her because he wanted her to be part of the panel. Unfortunately, she died before, that was in June last year. But anyway, so when he found out that she had this massive archive from the mid-50s all the way up until last year, he asked the head of the archive in the library to get in touch with us, and they spent 3 days looking through everything. And they said actually on the end of the first day that we want this archive, and it's every posters, programs. It's an amazing archive of radical film, art film, political activism. And it's that's what the archive consists of, and some really a lot of photography, posters, books. So they've taken away, it's a large group of boxes. I was there just meeting the head of the archive one day because I had a few books that they'd forgotten, and his assistant said, "Oh, what's your name?" And I said, "Oh, my mum, Dylan Stone, it's my mum's archive he took." And she said, "Oh God, that's a big archive." So that was a really nice thing to hear. And yeah, so I would imagine the next year or so it will all be catalogued and ready to look at. And Constantine was the first person to look for stuff. In fact, he took out that first still that was the front of a catalogue, or the inside pages of a catalogue.
Catalogue, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dylan.
Yeah.
So I can just ask, I will ask the audience to ask some questions, sure, but I'll just quickly whiz through and ask Adam, perhaps if you'd like to explain a little bit about how you connected between New York and North Kensington, because obviously you made this film in New York. I didn't really know you at that time, but you made this film, but I know you for your photography work in North Kensington, not your Pink Floyd, which you're internationally known for sort of documenting the first Pink Floyd concerts, but actually really liked, and I think I may have reunited you with some of your lost photographs of North Kensington, the play spaces that you captured in the late 60s and 70s around the Westway. And perhaps you'd like to tell the audience a little bit about how the Westway, how you sort of became an activist in the area, via your art. And
That's a long story.
Okay, sorry.
Just briefly, I was living in this area in 1960-62, and before I said that, I applied for a job here in 1957 as a projectionist. I wouldn't like to say how old I am, but anyway, I did, and it didn't fit in with what I was doing, and so I said no. Right, 1960 to 62, I lived in this neighbourhood, and then I went to New York for 4 years, and I worked as an economist and then as a photographer. I just took it up suddenly, and then I came back to London and photographed Velvet Underground's first performances and several other performances that they did in New York for Andy Warhol. And but the first pictures were before Andy Warhol got involved with them. We came back to London, and I was living in this area, and they were about to start building Westway, and I got very involved in proposing a scheme for an adventure playground in the first bit, under the first bit in Acklam Road, and then later we increased the area we were trying to get to 23 acres, which became what's Westway now, and was finally accepted. It took 3 years of continuous work to get them to accept it. But that was a bit community activism locally. Filming, I was a photographer in New York part of the time, and I came back, and then we ran playgrounds under the motorway before it was finished, and in other places too. And those are the photographs you were talking about. And I think I'm going to try and get an exhibition of them, because there's some nice pictures. All my negatives are destroyed because they were at a lab, and I went away for a while, and when I came back they were gone bankrupt, and the lab, and they just chucked all my 15 years of work onto the street or junked it. So I need to Constantine found some of my pictures of the kids playing, which are my best pictures of all, I think, by a long way. I love them. And then I also was photographing Pink Floyd at UFO and Roundhouse. So I think that's probably enough.
Thank you. Yeah, and we'll just have a quick one with JB, Jonathan Barnett. Actually, tell us a little bit about the Portabello Film Festival, because this is part of the Portabello Film Festival. Perhaps some of the people here are not aware of it, because it's right here. It's in the north of the borough, and it's been going for many years. And yeah.
Yeah, well, we started in 1996. It was started by Barney Platts Mills, who made an amazing film called Bronco Bullfrog. And we decided right at the beginning that we weren't going to charge admission for it, and we were going to try and show as many films as possible that were submitted. And that's it, basically, and that's what we've been doing for 24 years. And it's a free festival, so it kind of depends on local people kind of wanting to let us use the place for nothing, like the wonderful Gate Cinema. And we had Guy Ritchie's first film, we had Sarah Gavron's first film, we had Shane Meadows. So a lot of people have passed through us. The idea is it's just a platform for new filmmakers to show their films. And most of them are shorts. And I suppose the whole thing really comes out of this whole thing that's come out today, which is this kind of countercultural spirit of this area. We're definitely North Kensington, we're not Chelsea or anything like that. And it's amazing what has come out of this area. Pink Floyd, The Clash, Michael Horowitz. It's a lot of the greatest art in this country has come from around here, and it's all come from a kind of countercultural perspective, and hopefully that's the perspective that the festival presents.
Thank you very much, JB. I'd like to invite any questions from the audience. It could be anything that you've seen in the film programme. We obviously have got a panel here who can perhaps answer any of your questions. So is anybody who'd like to, or perhaps share your memories or experiences of this cinema? If we have any people who've been here a while and would like to
ask a question.
Yes, please, yeah.
Can you tell me how you can still run a free film festival, and how tight it is and how hard it is to get funded?
Yeah, no, it's very difficult to get funding. Obviously it's a free festival, so it doesn't particularly appeal to your average corporate sponsor who wants to make loads of money, but Now, the council have been good to us, and the Westway Trust have been good to us, and we don't get very much. I mean, this year's whole festival, which lasts for 18 days, and there's about 30 different shows, is being done on £10,000. So if anybody ever does see this film or anything, you know, if they want to try and give us some more money, they'd be very welcome.
And can you also tell me if you would like to encourage youngsters for the area to get involved with the film festival, especially ones that are running about with guns and knives? Would you like to get them off the streets and make films?
Yeah, it'd be great if they did. I mean, that's how we started. We have this thing called Massive Videos that was being run by this Barney Platts Mills, and the whole idea for that was that it was for something for kids off the street to make films rather than going around causing trouble.
I also, the very end person, I can't remember your name because I'm hopeless with names, yeah. I also lost all my film, all my negatives and everything else in the fire last year. So I know how you feel and I know how gutted you are. That was just to let you know.
Gutted. I'm not actually.
No.
Life goes on. You do something different.
Right, okay.
I've been doing other things. I've got allotments. We never stop working on our allotments now. So everything's fine.
I was totally gutted. I was like losing a little baby.
Thank you.
There you go. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who'd like to ask a question or share any experiences at the cinema or? Anybody else, please just put your hand up. I'll come to chat to you. Oh, yeah. Great.
I was going to ask Adam about the soundtrack to his film, whether that was original or whether it's been dubbed over. I mean, it's really good.
Oh, thank you very much. The soundtrack, I left America in 1966 and came back to New York came back to London and left the film, and the film stopped, shot and everything, but left it with Yvette, who did the whole editing and soundtrack. And the sound engineer gave us that music. I don't know, it's wonderful music. I really like the music. Did anyone remember that? Did anyone notice the music? Yeah. It was terrific music. It goes on in my brain all the time. And just gave it to us, which is part of the wonderful pleasure of free things, of festivals, but it's also sound engineers giving away free music. It's wonderful. Soundtrack, she just edited it, and sent me sent me some sort of copy at the end of it, not very good quality, and had the original film stock, which turned out to be this stuff that gets dangerous after a long time in a tin, and spontaneously combusts, I think it does. Is that what happens? Something like that. And so it's a big problem for film archives, is that they have to recopy and renew the thing on stock that doesn't burn. She copied it, but very badly, which is why it was such a rubbish print. It was helped quite a lot by Constantine increasing the contrast, but originally it was quite a high contrast, sharp, clear film, and a big shame that it never survived. A bit like my negatives. But I've got some prints left of those pictures, so I can copy those, but negatives go. And this film now has got about 1/10 of the amount of information on the film that it had originally, so it's quite a damaged thing. And the sound was not too good either. It's what happens.
What happened to the original? What happened to the original was the question. Sorry, who asked that question?
The original's thrown away because it's dangerous.
But it could be transferred digitally by specialists. I mean, specialists could transfer. It's a nitro film, I take it.
Anything could have happened, but what actually happened, she copied it probably with a camera using VHS and then translated it into something else. It was translated about 3 times to save it, and the result was a CD with 1 gigabyte of information on it, and that's nothing compared to the amount of information in the original film. So it's hopeless, it's gone.
But the film itself still exists?
No, of course not, because it's spontaneously combustible, so it's a fire hazard. and has to be destroyed before it bursts into flames. You can't keep things forever.
But it hasn't spontaneously combusted as yet.
No. What I'm saying is that the film was made in 1965. By 1995, it was a public danger. It was like a bomb. It's going to burst into flames. So you can't keep it. You have to try and copy it, and she didn't do too well on the copying, and then it has to be destroyed. It has to be got rid of because it's dangerous. You do get that, do you?
Yes, I understand.
Right.
I mean, you know, I know quite a lot about archive film and specialists who deal with archive film, portraits film particularly. I mean, it's obviously requires very specialist handling, but it is possible to do.
It is at the time, but that's 1995 and not now. So the film just had to be destroyed, I think. Well, that's what she was told.
Okay, so it's no longer with us.
No, it's completely gone. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, I have another question, more directed towards the representative from Picture House. It's great to come to the Gate Theatre, which I haven't been to for quite a while. It's a wonderful picture of the independent film being screened, and I just wondered whether this is something which the Picture House, and obviously I don't know whether you can speak for the Picture House, or whether the Gate itself, is it something which is going to be taken on more, because that would be great to see, more independent film and sort of being screened within what is a mainstream film program.
It is quite difficult. The ethos of Picture House is to be a community-based cinema, probably more so than some other chains maybe. But over the years it looks like the Gate in particular has probably neglected that a little bit. I've certainly had a little bit of experience in my career trying to encourage that within whatever venue that I'm at, hence why we're doing what we're doing today. Picture House as a company, they just have their own distribution arm, as in within the last sort of 12 to 18 months. And that will be looking, as far as I know, at certain independent films and then potentially looking to distribute that throughout the network. As far as sort of literally independent screenings go, it can depend on cinema by cinema. Picture House is quite a good company for that, as they will give a venue manager a little bit of independence as far as being able to kind of do stuff with the venue. It is quite difficult. The Gate in particular is very difficult because it's a single screen cinema. Some of the other venues have 3 or 4 cinemas and various different sizes, so they can put on their mainstream films throughout the week, and then they can maybe do something with their smaller screen. Here that's not so possible, especially now with the distributor contracts. Some of the films we get in, we are just locked in. There's nothing we can do. We've got to show the same film time after time for that 1 week, and there's not an awful lot we can do about it. But when the opportunity arises with certain circumstances, it's definitely, the company itself will definitely look at that, and cinema managers independently will also do that.
Yeah, that's great news. I wondered whether shorts was something that, because that's obviously something that used to happen years ago, you'd get shorts as part of the programme, and whether that would be something that would be of interest. It's great to see here that the Picture House is taking that on board. I mean, I used to live near Brixton, and Brixton obviously is a very important part of cultural life in Brixton. So, that's just a question whether thoughts.
Yeah, if you definitely have anything, or you're part of, I know there's a lot of short film festivals that do actually do little tours. I believe that if you present something to Picture House as a whole, or again to a cinema, it's definitely something they will look at. I can't guarantee that they'll be successful in that, but it won't be brushed aside straight away.
Sure, strictly that you're looking.
What they used to do was to have Pathé News and a cartoon or something or other like that. Now there's only adverts, as the short film to start with. I don't know anybody who does anything different. Everybody's doing ads.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly an idea. One of the ideas for us getting involved with the festival was actually to do something with the short films. That was one of the original ideas we were looking at, that we would take all these shorts from the festival and we would put them in between the segments of the films. Or here, when I took over, the turnaround times for the screens were only 10 minutes. I've actually tripled that to half an hour just to make the flow of people coming in and out of the screen a lot better. But there's certainly potential there before our main programs to do stuff like that. Obviously, that needs to go through about 10 people higher up the food chain than me before we did anything like that. But it's certainly a possibility that we were certainly looking at for this.
Good. That's great, thank you. Were there any other questions anybody would like to ask? Might be a time for us to conclude our programme, I think. Yeah. Thanks very much, everybody. Thank you very much for